Good morning. I'm Mike Hamilton, Field CISO for Lumify Cyber,
And I'm Paymon Fod, SVP of Sales and Tech Partners.
and this is Lumify's Cybersecurity Podcast. Good morning. How are you?
I am excellent, Mike. How are you doing, buddy?
Good. How's the weather out there? Because here it's dark. It's like this season is dark.
It's pretty sunny in Vegas.
Yeah,
We're doing well. It's gonna be 64 today, looking nice.
64 sounds kind of good. They always talk about Vegas, how hot it is, and everybody says, well, it's a dry heat, right? Well, so is a microwave. That doesn't really mean anything to me.
It's true. Yeah, no, I know.
Yeah.
People relate it more, I think, to just Northern California because that's where I'm from, and I think there's a lot of similarities to it. But hey, excited to chat with you. I know both of us are coming from pretty interesting spaces.
Yep.
Me coming from the Castra team where we were a 24/7 MDR, you coming from Critical Insight as a 24/7 MDR. Both of us getting acquired within 12 months. I'd say it's been very refreshing. Love joining forces with you, man. I know we're off to a great start.
Yeah, I really enjoyed, honestly, the trip out to Scottsdale and marching into the SOC and meeting the analysts and okay, who plays guitar?
Yeah,
I'm really liking the people I meet, and looks like everybody's having a good time, which is really important in this job because analysts especially, man, you can burn out, but
big time.
you
Yeah,
got a
no,
good
big
team.
time.
Looks like they're doing good stuff.
Indeed.
So here's what we're going to do. So we're going
Yeah.
to do this. We're going to do this podcast once a week. There may be a rotating cast of characters, and we put out the daily cyber news blast. I've done that for 15 years, and so we're gonna pick a few stories from the week and talk about cybersecurity news that you need to know. And
Yeah.
this is always a tough choice. We could talk about the FBI recommending that all Americans use end-to-end encrypted communications, okay, which is a fascinating thing for the FBI to say.
Big time.
Congress is going after data brokers for selling location and personal data, finally. We could talk about the fact that Chinese have infiltrated telecommunication companies and compromised thousands of devices. But we're not going to talk about any of that. I picked different stuff, but I thought I would throw those out there.
No, we got
Uh,
some good topics.
okay, all right. Well, let's get into it.
Let's get into it. So, first one is we got hackers pivot from data breaches to total destruction. So break that down. Tell us what you're
Yeah.
seeing.
So this is troubling, and this is not something that hasn't been completely ignored. This keeps popping up, and now it's with greater frequency. So a wiper, right, is malware that just destroys your network. It looks like ransomware, everything's encrypted, nothing will work, but you're not getting anything back, right? There is no decryption key. And the
Right.
first time this happened, do you remember the Saudi Aramco thing a few years ago?
Yeah.
Do you remember how many computers got bricked?
I think like 30,000 or
Yeah,
something. Yeah, it
yeah,
was a serious one. I think it was kind of the foreshadowing.
yeah. Well, I mean, now, right, cyber is a tool of war.
Yeah.
And with increasing use of destructive tools like this, right? This is not a criminal thing. This is a nation state thing. This is a tool of war. Given the
Right.
geopolitical situation we're in right now globally,
Yep. Yep.
heads up, man. And so, I mean, here's what this drives home to me. Um, this is where you need to really focus on impact management, right? Because
Yep.
if a piece of malware hits your network and you detect it and you expunge it, if that's the right word, no harm, no foul, right?
Yeah.
Because stuff is going to happen.
Yes.
So, this is to me about monitoring, detection, response, and limiting that impact. You
Yeah.
know,
It's like my good buddy, our SVP of engineering, Tony Simone, the Castro co-founder, great guy. He taught me that great quote, which is, prevention is desired, but detection is required. And I think again, this is another attack vector that just really speaks, volumes to that. And to your point, it does. It's always going to spill over into the geopolitical side of things,
yep,
nation state attacks. These types of motives are just undeniable at this point, which is why it's hard to avoid the political side of it, which I think is probably a good dovetail into, now healthcare is also being regulated by Congress. Is that Tell us more about that?
yeah. Well, so healthcare, right?
Yeah,
Healthcare gets smacked Well, they're in the top three, right? It's healthcare, local government, manufacturing. Those are really the top
Yeah, the
three, and those
target.
things are all very critical.
Sure.
Manufacturing, from the standpoint of they can't stand downtime, they're really going to pay that ransom. But when you talk about knocking over local governments, healthcare, stuff like that, that affects us at the scale we live our lives.
Right.
That's super troubling. So there's regulatory pressure, there's civil actions that are being conducted, class action suits every time that there is unauthorized disclosure of protected records, things like that. And now Congress has decided to wake up about this, and Congress is considering civil and criminal penalties for executives that fail to implement controls.
Right. Of
So, this goes to, right? So, the NIST cybersecurity framework, right? Version
course.
2.0 has got that new focus area for governance. Executives have to be involved in risk management decisions because if you're not going to be able to insulate yourself from these claims, possibly of executive negligence, right?
For
So,
sure. No,
get
I think
assessed.
it's necessary, especially as as we get closer towards the end of the year. Budgets are literally being in discussion right now.
Yep.
I think more and more organizations are starting to realize that this does impact the bottom line, right?
Yeah.
Ultimately, these nation state attacks, that's their motive. Their motive is to ultimately do harm, right? And if you're not taking these types of precautions, if you don't have 24/7 levels of detection and response to have real actionable, measurable type of responses to these things, then it's not a matter of if and when. We hear that too often in the industry. So
Yeah.
no, these are all, I think, really good talking points. There's not a doubt we could probably unpack each one of these for an hour. But if you were going to really focus your efforts, I think another great topic you talked about earlier was that there's 5 ransomware groups right now that are responsible for about 40% of the cyber attacks, in 2024. So if we were going to focus these efforts, it sounds like we can address a large part of these attacks, at least 40% of them, by doing these types of preemptive measures. Tell us more about that.
So I'm just a real fan of boiling things down into, the simplest way possible to solve the problem. You talk about the three main vectors for initial access to compromising a network is credential abuse,
Yeah.
vulnerability exploit, social engineering, right? So
Yes.
those are three things you should focus on. Well, if 5 ransomware groups are responsible for 40% of the attacks, then study their TTPs, right? Tactics, tools, procedures,
Right.
and if you don't have a threat intelligence group and don't actively create, detection analytics, make sure you have a service that does, because you got to keep in front of these guys. These are corporations that are always out there figuring out how to break stuff and get in.
Indeed.
And if you know their techniques for doing this, you're looking for those techniques, right? This reduces the complexity of defending.
Indeed, indeed. No, and I think given the large percentage that's coming back, the common denominator, it's interesting that you mentioned TTPs because the adversaries on the other side of this are literally doing the same exact thing to
Yeah.
these organizations. They're understanding their users, they're understanding their assets, they're understanding what are their normal behaviors throughout the day, and that's exactly I think the technology, the type of processes that we're using on our side to also be able to detect, malicious intent, right? By building, a large data lake of, normal behavior for our customers and for, what's normal in their environment in terms of users and assets, we can start to see any kind of deviation in behavior. And, even if there is, which, you mentioned earlier, a compromised credential, which is by far one of the largest, popular attack vectors right now. I think the common phrase is they're no longer, hackers are no longer hacking; they're just logging in, and it's
Yeah.
because, to your point, those 3 vectors, if they're successful at that, they get username and password. That's kind of checkmate for most organizations who can't detect compromised credential, or even worse, a malicious insider, somebody who has malicious intent within the organization who already has access.
Yep.
I think these are things we certainly excel in, and given Critical Insight's background, around penetration testing and tabletop exercises and incident response. I think you guys have really interesting perspective on being able to not only on the offensive side, but the defensive side as well.
Yep, yep. And we're glad to augment Lumify's capabilities with our consulting group and especially our incident response team, who is really getting worked hard.
Indeed.
That's
Yeah, no,
a sign of the times, right?
yeah, that's we're growing, I think, at a very healthy rate right now between doing three M&As, three mergers in the last 13 months between Cashred, Netshurion, and now Critical Insight. We've also proven, successfully that because of our proprietary SOC automation tool, Shield Vision, we're able to work with a variety of different tools. And I think the big topic of not only this year and I think the next probably few years is going to be AI. And I think that leads us to a pretty fun topic, which is tell us more about Daisy, Michael.
Okay. So this is one thing I forgot to say is we're always going to do a last story about something absurd because in this
Yeah,
business there is absurdity that pops up and you just have to laugh.
big time.
So you've probably seen the YouTube videos of the people that scam the scammers
Of
and
course, one of my
even get
favorites.
access to their cameras
Oh
and
yeah,
tell them who's sitting next to them while
oh
they have
yeah,
them on the phone, right?
yeah,
So that doesn't scale well, right? I mean, there's people that do this, but it doesn't scale well. So here's Daisy,
yeah.
and this is an AI granny chatbot that is intentionally developed to waste the time of scammers. And so when when you get Daisy on the phone with the fraudsters, Daisy will tell them stories about her family and talk about knitting and fake details about her bank, right? And so, people scammers. Well, now you can automate that, waste the time of these people, and cost them money. I
Money,
think
yeah.
that's a really good use of AI.
Big time. Yeah, and
Yeah,
there's also really cool variations of it as well. I've seen different versions of it where it's the AI on it is actually it's really cool. It's able to not only detect when you've the person on the other phone has basically stopped talking, but it takes into context what they're saying and it kind of goes down another rabbit hole of just
meanders down.
of
Yeah,
yeah, of rambling. And there was one where he was like, the scammer just went on this like pitch or whatever of what they were trying to scam him about. And the guy was like, hold on, there's a bee on my arm. I think it's crawling on my arm. I can't hold on. Okay, say what would you say again? And then ask the scammer to like go through it all over again. So I couldn't agree, man. I couldn't agree
okay.
more, man. It's
All right,
fun.
we got to get out of here.
Let's do
Uh,
it.
we're coming up on time. Okay, man. Thanks. I'll see you next week.
See you
Goodbye
soon.
from Lumify Cybersecurity Podcast. See you later.
Later.